Hello guys, this is Dr. Iwadia once again, and welcome to lesson 3 of file handling. This lesson is about reading a file line by line. In our previous lesson we learned to read a file all at a go, and I actually introduced Readline as a method for reading a file line by line. Today we'll go deeper into how you read a file line by line. Okay, for your starter, I would like you to create this text file and save it to your lesson 3 folder as teachers.txt. Last lesson I showed you how to create a text file. Simply open Notepad and then type the data in it. Save that as a text file using that name teachers. Okay, once you've done that, then we're ready to go. Okay, so as a quick recap on what we did last lesson, most programs would read a text file in order to search for a record or entry in it. For example, if you have a text file of your teachers, you may want to go through the text file to find out who your science teacher is, or who your computer science teacher is, or even to find out all the teachers that are maybe Mrs. or Miss or Doctor. Okay, and you use Readline and Readlines for that. So Readline enables us to read a text file one line at a time, and as you read each line, you are able to process the line to find or to search for what you are looking for. Okay, so remember that before you can read a file, you have to open it. Remember the 3 steps we talked about last lesson? To read or write to a file, you do 3 things. First, open it, then do what you want to do, and lastly, close the file. Similar to reading from a book or writing to a book. Before you can write to a book or read from a book, first you open it, and once you've opened it, you read the book or write to the book, and once you finish, you close it. So those 3 steps in order. Right, so I'm going to start with this teacher example. I want you to create this program and save it to the same folder. I will modify this program in stages, and as I do that, I will explain what I'm doing. So I'm just going to open my own version of the program, and I will start making modifications to it and talking you through what I am doing, so you can see how this actually works. Okay, so this is my version of the program. So step 1, I open the file. My file equals open teachers.txt file. And then step 2, I read the first line of the file and save the content to a variable that I call line 1. Right? So that will read the first line. And then I print that line so we see what it is. So that should be line 1. So I print line 1, see what is in it, and then I close the file as the 3rd step. Okay, so let's run this and see what the output is. So Mrs. Brown, English language. If we go to our text file, we'll see that Mrs. Brown, English language is the first line. So at this point, we've called Readline, it's read the first line, and we've closed the file. If we left the file open, then our cursor would be at the start of the second line, ready to read the second line there. Okay, so let's go back to that program and see if we can read the second line. If we go back there, after reading the first line, before we close the file, we go back there and read the second line. So I'm just going to type line 2 equals my file dot readline. So we read the second line, and instead of printing that first line, we now print line 2. Okay, so let's run this and see what we get. Okay, so now instead of Miss Brown, it's giving us Miss Ali. Mr. Ali, who is the second entry, second record on our text file. Okay, and you can keep going on, just keep changing that and reading what the lines one by one. Okay, so I can go back there and do line 3. I can just do copy and paste anyway. Copy that, line 2, then press enter, change that to line 3. You see that it doesn't really matter whether you space that out, you would know what it's doing. Then you can do line 4 as well. Okay, just make sure you know how many lines you have in your text file, and there, if I want, I can print line 4 instead of line 2, right? So if I run that, right, so we now have Mr. Davis photography, which will be at line 4. So go back to text file. Mr. Davis is photography in line 4. Okay, so that works really well, but I would consider that as an amateur implementation of reading the lines one by one. There are better ways to do this. Okay, so I'm going to modify this. Think of a better way to do this. Why have so many different variables? How can, if we have 500 lines and we continue this way, it means we're going to have 500 variables declared from line 1 to line 500, right? We can easily do this by creating a list. Okay, so I'm going to take this off, take all of that off, right? And I'm going to create a list here, and when I read my lines, I'll just put them in the list. So I'm going to call my list lines equals, I'll just create an empty list, right? So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to run a for loop and save all the data into my list. So I do for line in range. Right, let's see how many items we have here. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So if I do 7 for lines in range 7, right, so it's going to start from 0 and read to 6, which will be 7 items, right? So I can just do for lines in range 6, the line the new line equals my file dot read line, right? So I'm going to read each line in the, as it loops, and then I won't print that. Okay, so I read each line. When I read each line, what I want to do is add the line to my list, right? So I can do lines dot append new line. So I take the new line that I've just read and add it to my list, right? Then at the end of that, I close my text file. Right? I can close my text file because I've put all the data in my list. Now that I've closed my text file, I can read from my list. So I can print lines, and maybe let's print the third entry, so to be 2. Print that. Okay, so I'll print the third entry. Let's run this and see how it works. Okay, print Dr. Rushdie Science, which is the third entry. Go in there, you see 1, 2, and 3. 3 is Dr. Rushdie Science. Okay, because we've we've read this data from the text file, which is this, into our list, which is part of the program lines. That's the list, right? We've read the data into our list, and then we've closed the file. We no longer need to work with the file. We've read everything and put in our list. We can now go ahead and do what we want with our list. I can print lines 5. The list is there. It's part of your program, so you can keep printing. You've closed the text file, but you have the data in your list. You've actually duplicated the data into your list in the program. So now you are working from your program instead of the text file. Okay, so you did Dr. Wilder Computer Science. Okay, so you can keep doing that to print whatever item of the list that you want to print. Okay, if you print 0, that will be the first item because list index starts at 0. So let's try that. I'll just change that to 0. All right, and let's actually print it twice. Change that to 0, 0. Okay, so you do that. If I from that, so it prints that twice. Okay, so that shows you it's reading from the list now instead of the file. It's copied everything in the file into the list, and it's now reading from the list. Okay. The problem here is, how do you know how many lines you have in the text file? Here we've put 7 because we created that ourselves, so we know how many lines we have there. But what if you were given that text file and it's a text file that contains millions of entries, and you don't even know how the exact number of entries? Well, there's a way around that, and that is where the Readlines comes in. With Readlines, you don't really need to create your list. It would create it for you, right? So Readlines creates the list for you. All you have to do is just write lines equals, and you don't even need a follow. You just write lines equals my file dot read, and you just add s there. So what this is going to do is it would read the file line by line and save that to lines, to a list called lines. Right? So if you do lines 0, it will print the first one. If you do lines 2, it will do the third entry. And if you do print lines 5, it would print the 6th entry. Okay, this is easy. So Readlines would actually do two things. It would create the list for you and populate it, so you don't have to create the list yourself, right? And you don't have to run a for loop to populate it. How the beauty in this is, as a result of that, you no longer need to know how many lines you have in the text file. So let me just run this and you see how it works. See? So that works. So it prints the first entry, the third entry, and then the 6th entry. So this is the beauty in Readlines. Let me just summarize this. Right? I'm just going to put notes there. Readlines first creates a list for you and populates it. Okay, you no longer need a for loop to do this. That's beautiful. So once it's done this for you, you don't need the for loop, you don't need to create your list. It will just, whatever variable you give it, it will take that as a list and populate it for you. And then you don't even need to search for end of line, end of file character. So you probably won't understand this, but as you mature in your programming, you will get it. You no longer need to check for end of character, end of file. End of file is EOF in short, which means end of file. But you will understand this as the time goes on. Okay, right. So I'm going to make a date of here for a date, just to get some more understanding into this program. Okay, so like I said at the beginning, if I just go back to the slide, when we read from a file, most times we do so to search for an item. So we read a file in order to search for a record or entry in it. For example, we may want to read through the teachers.txt file to look for the name of your science teacher. Okay, so let us say we're looking for the name of your science teacher. We'll go back to this part. Right, I'm just going to delete these notes now because you must have seen them. I'll delete all these prints too. Right, so we'll go back here. So you've read all the lines into lines, right? It's all in there as a list. Right, so we can now close our file. So we close the file and we work with lines. Okay, so we're going to go through lines one by one using a for loop, and we basically testing whether science is in each line. Okay, so we'll do for each line in lines. So doing for each line is in lines. If line, no, if let's just put science in so what this is going to do is it's going to go through each line in lines. So go through the list of lines. When it finds signs in each of the lines, it will print it. Let's see how that works. Invalid syntax. Let's take it. Let's take that out and see. Line in line. Yeah, see that? Okay, so science is in computer science and science is in science, so it's just prepared those two subjects. Okay, okay. So if we wanted, we could do dr as well. We are doing the title for each line in line. If dr in line, print line. So those ones with dr, and if we wanted to print the ones with miss alone, we just put miss. Right, for each line in line, if miss in line, print line. See, Miss Thompson. Okay. If we wanted the Mr., we just put Mr. Right. Okay. So, but that's so here you see the problem with that. It points Mr. and because Mrs. starts with Mr., I will return that as well. Anyway, so let me just talk about how you can use this. In a previous GCSE task, students were asked to process a text file that contained records of owners of vehicles. If you think of what DVLA does, anytime your vehicle is caught speeding, it will take that vehicle registration number, query it on the DVLA database to find out the owner of the vehicle, and then it would automatically issue a ticket to the owner of that vehicle. So you had a text file that contained vehicle registration number and then the name and address of the owner. Okay, so what you're looking for is you take the search item, which is the vehicle registration number, find out if it's contained in that line, and then print the address of the person. Okay, so I'm going to set that as a task for you. Basically what you will be doing is you will use what you've learned in this lesson to process a text file looking for any vehicle registration number that is entered, that's passed as a parameter to the program or the function that you're going to write. And when that search item is found, you will return the address of the owner of that vehicle. Okay, so I will set that for you as your task following this lesson. Okay guys, so thank you for listening, and I'll see you again very soon. Bye bye.